It all starts back in 1972 with a report filed by residents living along the Norwegian coast, more specifically, around Sognefjord. They claimed to have witnessed something enormous and inexplicable out in the sea. Its shadow moved at a frightening speed, generating a wave powerful enough to violently rock their boat, yet nobody could make out what the thing actually was. One thing was certain, though. It was real, and its length surpassed 200 meters. The Navy launched a search of the Norwegian Sea in response, but they wrote the whole thing off as a Soviet submarine. The sheer size of the ocean made any real confirmation impossible, and the witnesses were left questioning their own eyes. Fast forward to the present, and we're introduced to two young men out on jet skis, having the time of their lives in Sognefjord, a region of enormous valleys swallowed by the sea. They have absolutely no idea that something is down there, a massive gray shadow gliding silently along the seafloor beneath them. As they race across the surface, laughing and pulling off tricks, the thing below makes its move, surging upward without warning and dragging them both down to their deaths. Somewhere else entirely, we meet Johanne, a marine biologist who's poring over ocean mapping data her diving team has just brought in. Through an audio recording, she can hear the ambient sounds of the water and the biological activity stirring within the seabed of a particular coastal zone. Then, her phone rings. It's Larson, a colleague from the Institute of Marine Research. She tries to brush him off, telling him she's in the middle of something and needs to get back to her mapping site, because the acoustic graphs are showing some deeply unusual readings. But Larson won't let it go. He needs her specifically, he says. She's the best they have at this kind of work. He wants her to head east to the Vangnes area. The moment she hears the name, something in her shifts. She doesn't want to go back there, though she keeps the reason to herself. Still, when it becomes clear this is strictly a professional matter, she feels she has no real choice. Larson promises to send her a video that'll make her forget any reservations she has. Sitting alone in her car in the garage, the clip arrives on her phone. Thousands of fish lying out of the water, as if they'd willingly abandoned the sea, something the scientists simply cannot explain. Determined to understand what she's looking at, Johanne makes her way to the location Larson described. When she gets out of the car, she pauses for a moment, visibly wrestling with something. She tries calling a man named Eric, someone from her past, but he doesn't pick up. Meanwhile, a small aircraft is cutting across the fjord valley in the Norwegian Sea, an area where the water drops to depths of 1.5 kilometers, heading toward a large fish farm, a sophisticated floating structure built for aquaculture. For the Asian investor on board, this visit represents a major opportunity for his company, which specializes in high-end salmon farming. The plane touches down, and the investment delegation steps onto the sleek floating complex belonging to Western Salmon. The facility itself rests on a foundation constructed from salvaged warship components. The site manager, Tommy, makes the introductions. The investor, Jin Jong, the aquaculture engineer, Eric, and the monitoring technician, George. George kicks things off with a presentation video. He explains that sea lice are a constant threat to salmon stocks. They latch on and can kill entire schools within hours. But their sonic lice technology, he says, has cracked the problem. The device emits a continuous, precisely calibrated sound wave that causes the lice to simply detach from the fish. The pitch impresses, but one of Jin Jong's people isn't sold. He brings up whispers he's heard that this same technology slows the growth of the fish and stresses them out, making the meat tough and unappetizing. Eric steps in to correct him. When the frequency is set correctly, he explains, the salmon stay perfectly healthy. That's exactly how the devices are calibrated. He does concede one thing. If the frequency were cranked up to an extreme level, it could devastate the local ecosystem entirely. This visibly unnerves the investor. Eric is quick to reassure him. The system is precise, reliable, and its execution is guaranteed. Back on land, Johanne arrives in the town of Vangnes. It's a peaceful, charming place, the kind of spot where tourists feel genuinely at ease. Strolling along the pier, she runs into her old friend, Officer Henriette. Then, in what feels like a strange twist of fate, she also crosses paths with Tommy, whom she hasn't seen in 7 years. And there's Maria, Henriette's daughter, who has grown into a confident and beautiful young woman. Maria greets her warmly, but mentions she has somewhere to be. She climbs into a van with a group of other young people, and they head out to sea. Later, Henriette takes Johann to a site that needs her professional eye. What Johann finds there is a large fishing net, completely shredded. The disturbing part is that this isn't an isolated incident. The same thing has been happening across multiple locations. The story then cuts to Maria's group. They've made their way to the edge of the valley, the very spot Johann saw in the video Larson sent her. Maria is there with Roger and Peter and the others, all part of a movement pushing to shut down Western Salmon's operation over its environmental impact. Inside the van, the group debates whether to go ahead with their plan. Maria urges caution. Wait and see what Johanna does first, she tells them. She believes Johann will do the right thing. If the complex turns out to be behind the mass fish deaths, Johann will pull the plug on it. Meanwhile, back at Western Salmon, Eric instructs George to power up the devices. At roughly the same time, Johann is approaching the facility by boat alongside her old friend Olaf, a fisherman and seasoned boat captain. Olaf is blunt about it. He tells her she needs to shut the place down because as far as he's concerned, it's responsible for the thousands of dead fish turning up in the area. She boards the complex, and her arrival clearly catches Eric off guard. She explains she's there on behalf of the Institute of Marine Research to conduct an inspection, and he delegates George to show her around. The tension between Johanny and Eric is palpable. There's a history there, something that once ran deep and then broke apart, and neither of them quite knows how to stand in the same room. George gives her the tour, noting along the way that the facility is essentially unsinkable. The warship hull sections forming its base are 40 millimeters thick. They eventually show her to her quarters for the night. The following morning, they take her out on the water so she can listen to what's happening in the depths below. Eric is with her. They manage a brief, somewhat stilted conversation before something stops them cold. A massive shadow materializing beneath their boat. Something enormous is moving down there, slow and deliberate. They tell themselves it's probably just a large school of fish. On a coastal road not far from there, hundreds of crabs are crawling out of the water en masse, as though something has sent them fleeing. Hours later, Johann is at Tommy's house. She spends a little time with Maria, who lights up when Johann says kind things about her new boat, a gift from her father. They get to talking about the footage Maria filmed, and the girl asks Johann point blank what she's actually there to do. Maria makes no secret of where she stands. The complex is to blame, and she wants Johann to fight to close it. But Johann holds her ground. She produces reports, she says, and the decision about what happens to the facility belongs to someone else. The answer disappoints Maria deeply and makes her question whether Johann can really be trusted. When Johann returns to the complex, she digs into the team's data on the salmon. The deaths haven't stopped, but the lice numbers are actually dropping, which rules out the parasites as the cause. She asks to see the data from the sonic lice devices, a request that seems to put George on edge. Then she heads out to inspect the cages directly. Somewhere underwater nearby, Tommy is giving a pitch to another round of investors. His phone buzzes. It's Eric, warning him that Johanny is sniffing around and that he's worried she might uncover something damaging. Tommy tells him to handle whatever comes up and get straight back to business. Particularly pleased when Jinzhong floats the idea of building even more facilities across the expansive waters of Sognefjord. Back in the complex, Johann works through the sonic lice data while Eric keeps a watchful eye on her. What she finds stops her dead. The acoustic frequencies are affecting the cardiovascular systems of the fish. Past a certain threshold, she realizes, the heart simply bursts. The scale of what that means is immediately apparent to her. Down below the waterline, something is deliberately and forcefully striking the equipment. An alert pings George's station, and he tells Eric he'll go check the device. Johanny is close by and joins him. As they make their way down, a deep, rhythmic thudding reverberates through the base of the complex. It's strange enough to catch their attention, but not alarming enough to trigger any real sense of danger. When Eric opens up the device housing for a look inside, he finds an organic substance, something neither of them has ever seen before. Johann takes a sample straight to the lab. What she finds there is baffling. It belongs to a species entirely unknown to science, though it bears the hallmarks of a deep-sea organism. Its body is coated in a glowing, viscous fluid. Neither of them can work out why something adapted for the deep ocean would be this close to the surface. Eric notices a drop of the substance on Johanne's cheek. She wipes it off immediately, the fear of contamination flashing across her face. In another part of the valley, Officer Henriette has located the jet skis belonging to the two young men who went missing. She concludes they must have drowned. Later that evening at the complex, George picks up a new alert. The salmon's behavior has shifted at another location. His colleague flags it too. The fish are attacking each other, consumed by some kind of frenzy. The team decides to send divers down to get a closer look, and Johanne volunteers to go first. What she finds at the bottom is horrifying. Disturbing a small group of fish, she comes face to face with the body of one of the missing youths. They surface immediately and call Henriette. Johanne shows her the luminous substance found on the corpse. The officer asks whether the fish farm could be the source, but Johanne shakes her head. This substance, she explains, comes from a massive animal living in the deep. Many marine creatures produce it either when they sense a predator nearby or during spawning. When Henriette gets home that night, Tommy greets her with good news of his own. The investors have committed to the project, and Western salmon is set to expand to 10 times its current size. Night settles over the fjord, but the complex never really sleeps. Eric hears a loud bang somewhere outside and goes to investigate. One of the salmon cages is in complete turmoil. The fish inside are frantic and disoriented. In her room, Johanne is wide awake, unable to settle. Then she feels something moving on her stomach and lurches out of bed in panic, only to realize, heart-pounding, that there was nothing there. Just her mind. The next day, in another stretch of the valley, a group of young people is out kayaking. They have no idea what's beneath them. Something surfaces nearby, limbs resembling octopus arms rising just below the waterline. Then, without any warning, one of the kayakers is yanked straight down, boat and all. The rest freeze, confused, and then the arms emerge fully, lashing out at the others. Within minutes, the water lies completely still again, as though nothing ever happened. Far from the complex, Johanne is still out on the water, listening to the depths through her equipment. Then it hits her, a sound so powerful it nearly blows out her ears through the headphones. She pinpoints which buoy the noise is coming from and heads straight for it. On the way, she asks Olaf about the stories he used to share with journalists when he was young. He tells her, once in the middle of a dense fog hanging over the fjord, he watched the water begin to move strangely, as though something enormous was pushing up from below. Through the fog, he couldn't make out a shape, only a shadow, vast and formless, before it vanished beneath the surface. For Johanne, that story lands differently now. She finds herself genuinely entertaining a possibility she would have dismissed not long ago. Back at the town pier, the officer gets another call. When she arrives, she finds kayaks washed up along the shore, and tucked inside one of them, half a human body. The sight shakes Henriette to her core. What makes it stranger still are the circular marks left on the boats. Out on the water elsewhere, a tourist vessel collides with something enormous that has suddenly risen to the surface. It's clearly alive, and it appears to be trying to scrape something off its body. At the complex, Johanne runs her analysis and concludes that the sonic lice frequencies are traveling all the way to the valley's maximum depth. She tells Eric flatly that continuing to operate the device is not safe. The signal is reaching 2 kilometers out. Impossible, Eric insists, because he built in a barrier to contain the lower frequencies. But Johanne presses him. The barrier isn't working, and the ecosystem is paying the price. Wanting the truth for himself, Eric goes straight to the monitoring cabin and makes George pull up the data. Then he calls Tommy. The confrontation is direct. Eric tells him the signal barriers were switched off, that the valley and everything living in it could be destroyed because of this. Tommy tries to spin it, accuses Johanne of fabricating things to manipulate Eric into shutting the project down. Then, without any apparent shame, he asks Eric to let it run. The results will make the investors open their wallets even wider, and they'll all come out richer. He hangs up, leaving Eric seething. Underwater in his private observation area, Tommy is working through paperwork when a body drifts past the glass, the second missing youth. The room goes silent with shock. In the lab, Johanne and her colleagues piece together more about the parasite specimen. She announces her conclusion. What they found on the equipment isn't the main organism. It's a parasite. which means somewhere out there is a host creature that must be absolutely enormous. Knowing the damage the device could still do, Eric says he's shutting down the sonic lice. George, who has quietly aligned himself with Tommy's position, refuses to allow it. Down at the pier in town, while children splash around in the shallows, the authorities are moving people out of the water. Nobody goes in until further notice, not with what's been happening. A short while later, Tommy arrives at his facility. Johanne confronts him in front of everyone. She lays it out plainly. His device's frequencies are destabilizing the entire ecosystem, affecting creatures both near the surface and in the deepest parts of the fjord. She shows him the evidence. Tommy doesn't budge. He's not about to surrender his livelihood. At the same time, Maria's group has quietly suited up in wetsuits and is edging toward the cages, intent on disabling the sonic lice devices themselves. Peter is the one who goes under, tasked with cutting the cables. He's almost at the device when a parasite comes out of nowhere and attacks him. He bursts back to the surface screaming, his friends reaching out for him. Then the water turns red and he's gone. Maria screams for help. Eric spots them through his binoculars, and when Tommy sees that it's Maria out there, he rushes toward her. At that exact moment, something slams into the base of the complex. The adults scramble to get the young people out of the water, while the whole structure shudders again and again. Anchor chains are being dragged. The alarm systems start wailing, and George frantically tries to figure out what's going wrong. Outside, Johanne is rooted to the spot. She watches as the entire valley fills with a thick, rolling fog, and then a sound erupts from somewhere in it, a deep, resonant boom that seems to come from everywhere at once. Then she sees it. A colossal arm, unmistakably belonging to some kind of giant cephalopod, rises from the water and smashes into part of the complex, nearly crushing her where she stands. The arm sweeps over her, almost as if testing the air, then slips back beneath the surface. She sprints inside and tells the others what they're dealing with. The creature is immense, and it is covered in hundreds of mutated parasites that are now launching themselves onto the complex, looking for new hosts. The group does the only thing they can think of. They go completely still and silent. Then one of the parasites drops through a ventilation shaft and lands in the corridor right in front of them. Roger loses his nerve and bolts. Maria, terrified but holding it together, steps forward and crushes it beneath her foot. In the control cabin, Eric and George feel the whole complex beginning to shift. Something is pulling it, dragging it sideways. Eric leaves to find the others. George watches through the glass as a massive arm toward the cabin, and he runs. In the corridor, the group watches in disbelief as another arm punches through the wall and closes around Maria, tearing her away with it. Tommy's screaming her name. The remaining arms are feeling their way through the complex, hunting. The group manages to lock themselves in another compartment. Then, inexplicably, the creature returns Maria, still alive, dropping her back inside the complex for a reason none of them can understand. Her father rushes to her. The creature goes on hammering at everything around it, and the force of it sends both Tommy and Maria into the water. Tommy can't get back up. The creature takes him. In another part of the structure, George comes across Roger, slumped against a wall and badly hurt. He moves to help him, and then realizes what he's looking at. Roger has become a host. A parasite is feeding on him from inside, and he is dying. George scrambles backward in horror, but the parasite comes after him. He manages to flip it over and leans in to look at it up close, and the creature drenches his face in a jet of black viscous liquid. His screams echo through the complex. That sound is enough. The giant creature homes in on the section and drags the entire container down into the valley. Johanna finds herself trapped in an air pipe, one of the creature's arms probing relentlessly in after her. Somehow she squeezes into an adjoining room and buys herself a few seconds. It doesn't last. The creature comes back, its arms sweeping methodically through the space, searching. She tries to move as little as possible, but even the smallest shift draws its attention. Something like a tongue runs across her jacket. She sheds it as fast as she can, but that isn't enough. The arm coils around her neck. Eric appears from the shadows with an axe, poised to strike. But Johanne catches his eye and shakes her head. The axe won't do a thing. Eric backs off and instead reaches for the boat's ignition. He fires up the motor. The sound immediately pulls the creature's focus away from Johann, and as it lunges at the engine, it loses part of its arm in the machinery. Out on the water, Henriette is searching a section of the valley from her boat when she stumbles onto a private vessel sitting empty in the water, smeared with blood. A parasite slips back over the side into the sea. Deep inside one of the complex's underwater tanks, another member of the team is cleaning up when something starts hammering against the reinforced glass. One of the parasites. It punches through, and cold water comes rushing in. Back inside the complex, the creature is systematically tearing the place apart. In the control cabin, Johann and Eric stare at the system panel, demanding frequency reductions, and Eric realizes he simply doesn't know how to override what's been set in motion. Johann picks up the axe and brings it down on the control panel. Just like that, the attack stops. In the sudden quiet, they look around and find Maria floating unconscious in the water. Johann dives in after her. Eric grabs a flare gun and fires it into the sky. The light arcs upward, and Henriette sees it from the water. In that brief, blazing illumination, everyone still alive gets their first full look at the creature, the true scale of it. The monster seems to still be seething, but it turns and sinks back down into the depths. Johanny knows this isn't over. She looks at Eric and tells him what needs to happen. He has to reprogram the remaining devices, deliberately overloading them. She knows what that means. The pressure will turn them into a bomb. It will obliterate the complex. But it will also do what nothing else has been able to do. As they work, a parasite finds its way to where Maria is resting, unconscious and unable to protect herself. Henriette is through the door before it can reach her, and she shoots it dead. With the device reprogrammed, Johann loads it onto a boat and heads out into the valley alone. Without telling Eric, she gets to open water, activates the frequency, and drops the device into the deep. Morning light begins to break through the fog. The valley is still and gray. Then the creature rises. It strikes the boat with enough force to throw Johann into the water. One of its arms finds her and wraps around her, and for a moment she's suspended there, face to face with something ancient and incomprehensible. The device reaches its final frequency. The pulse that comes out of it is devastating, a wall of sound that tears through the creature's cardiovascular system exactly as it did with the salmon. Its heart gives out. But Johanny is still underwater, and she has nothing left in her lungs. She can't make it back to the surface. After a few minutes, Eric, Maria, and Henriette arrive at the site, calling out for her. Then Olaf's voice comes through the fog. He's found her. He managed to pull her out. The moment is heavy with grief because Johanna did not survive. She gave her life to protect everyone in that valley, and there are no words adequate to the weight of that. But the story doesn't end there. Somewhere far below, in the darkness of the Norwegian Sea, a single egg, left behind by the creature, sits waiting. And before long, it will hatch.